One.
All right, thank you. Right, so good time of the day, everybody. I will do my best to keep Brian's level. So here we go. Welcome to the Learning Experience Working Group. Today is January 26th, and we have a special guest. So Sander, thank you so much for joining. I was hoping we could go through our normal agenda, and I've added point 4 there dedicated to the questions the group would like to ask Sander. So feel free to add anything there. Hi, Sean. Hi, Michael.
Hello.
Hello. So just saying hi to everybody. He's saying that we have a special guest today. And there's a new
section. I'm part of the team now, so no longer a special guest. So
you truly are. So yeah, there's point 4 there in our agenda for questions to Sander. So we're just going to go through to the points first, and then we'll get there. Christopher, is anything you'd like to add before we go to the agenda?
Not at all. I think you've captured everything. Let's just let's keep it moving.
All right, awesome. Okay, so let's start with the general update. The program is still green as we're on track for what we had committed to this week. Sorry, too many screens. Yeah, okay. From deliverables from last week, from last meeting, sorry, there was an action for me to create a more visual timeline and added to a parent epic. The link is in the agenda there. And I'd like to take the opportunity, since we have everyone here, to review it together, if that's okay. I can share my screen because I was reviewing it with Brian yesterday. I just want to confirm if the group is aligned. So let me share my screen real quick. Okay, can anyone see the timeline?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yep.
All right, so let me just open the calendar so I'm aligned. Okay, so right now we're here. We had the bidders call last week, and now this week we've given the vendors a week to come back with their answers from the requirements and all. So right now we're here, and then starting on the week of January 31st, we'll have the 4 vendor demos. And then here, this is where I've done a small update to the timeline because we didn't have this step here before. Yeah. But basically, I've added February 9 because this is where we have the next working group following the demos to do kind of like a down select. So we're gonna watch them of 4 vendors, but then we really want to select 2, and that is to do the POC. So moving here we're allowing pretty much 2 weeks so everyone can watch the recordings and ask questions and all of that. So the goal really is to have the POCs completed by the 21st of February. And then again, adding at March 2, just because it's when we have the working group, this meeting, so we can really select the platform and then to review that go and no go decision. And then hopefully we can create the implementation plan by the week of March 7. So I just want to pause here for a second and see if you have any comments, feedback. Is this a feasible timeline for everyone?
Yeah, and so I do know, and so this is where I was looking for Sundar's feedback as far as, you know, this is an aggressive timeline, right? We are in what I would consider more of a, you know, moving fast, trying to get to a decision quickly, based on the fact too that a lot of us have been through this before. A lot of us have been through this together before, and so I just wanted to see, Sundar, what do you see as the risk for moving this quickly?
I think with a lot of these things, you know, procurement is the long pole. So we have to make sure that we get that that process aligned. One of the things that I had suggested, I think again I put a very high level couple of slides on this. That after you get all the requirements pieces, there are other factors that come into play. Are there special relationships that, you know, is one of the vendors, you know, in a deeper partnership with GitLab in some manner? I mean, so those things all come into play also in your decision process, right? So you may want to think about some parallel lines around, hey, if we have these vendors lined up, the procurement, the relationships, any other things, I would just look at that part of it, because that ends up delaying a lot of these decisions.
Okay.
Otherwise, I think again, if we have already submitted the RFP to the vendors, we know what we want. Going through the demos might be, I would say that selection process and the proof of concept, perhaps 2-3 more weeks of cushion would be helpful. That's probably where I would, if we had to add anything here.
And you bring up a good point. I mean, part of this is, what we're driving to is we do want to get a very robust proof of concept around the technical certification so that we are truly taking some key use cases that we would then immediately flip into, more of a production mode that would go into our beta test that we're targeting around the May timeline. So I think that, thank you for shaping that thinking, because I think we can be working, even if we are in a deep down select with 2 vendors, we could be working in that deep POC that is not adding risk to where we want to be in May, but helps us drive to a better decision. 100%. Thank you for that, Sundar. And those, I actually was taking notes for everyone here on the very end, because I had sort of put that at the end under Sundar's questions. You have your own agenda item, Sundar, so it's great. Thank you.
Sundar, what are some things that we should be thinking about now as we think of migrating what we currently have in EdCast over to a new system, like to make that?
Yeah. Could you repeat the question, Dave?
Yeah, what should we be thinking about and or doing now to get ready for the migration of content from EdCast into a new system? Is there anything we need to do just so we don't get to that point and be like, oh crap, what do we do?
So we're going to have to, I think we have to look at multiple work streams as we go through this piece in here, right? So the biggest piece with content is we don't want garbage in, garbage. I mean, we don't want to take garbage and move it out there. I hate to use the term, but there's a lot of legacy content or content that is that we expect to change quite quickly. So we have to take the catalog and make a decision on what we are going to migrate over. That I think is the most important thing. And I think each of you has to look at, is there an owner for the field content? Is there an owner for the customer content, other content, and sort of make that decision. We don't want to lift and shift. Okay. So that to me would be one part of it. And I think we should look at on just sort of the domains and how we are going to control the different audiences. We need to start putting together some use cases so that the vendors can provide how that will manifest itself in their products and platforms, so that we can then begin to think about how do we need to look at this, right? So that will need a little bit of platform specific alignment. But we need to be thinking about that part also. But content specifically, I really think just thinking about what exactly are we going to move, that's the most important thing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I think, Kendra, you mentioned on a call yesterday that we were gonna, each DRI from every function was gonna review content individually to ensure that we moved it over, like it was on up to standards.
Yeah, so on the working group for this meeting last week, we had discussed how when we're going through the content at the same time, review if something is updated or outdated, and at that point, decide whether it needs to be moved over, so we don't move over a lot of content that isn't necessarily needed, or we could also remove duplication of effort at that time, so content that covers the same topics.
Let us also make sure the audience for each content is very clearly identified. Right? Internal, field, partner, customer, enthusiasts, who are, how do we break the content into these different groups?
Yeah, I think an easy way to do that is solidifying our naming convention that we're going to be using for the content moving forward. We have no solidified naming convention currently. So I think having those kind of standards when we move to a new platform will be very helpful for not only one, determining who the DRI is as far as the department wise, but also ensuring that we have that audience clearly defined in the content title.
Very good point there, Kendra. Yeah.
Can I just add as well, Kendra, you might already have a solution for this, but are we considered, if I'm a user that's 50% of the way through a certification on EdCast, do we need to put some plan in place to make sure that that progress carries on, or how we plan to notify them if that certification is going to move from one platform to another?
Separate work stream that should be a separate work stream that we'll need to build out in here for users and their experience, and when the cutoff from Edcast to this would happen, right? So that would be, because I don't think we're just going to completely turn off Edcast while we go through this, right? That's a separate work stream we'll need to build out.
Yeah, as far as switching between the two, I don't think it would be an issue for a user perspective because they wouldn't lose progress. All of the certification pathways in our SCORM courses have free-form navigation, which means they only have to complete the written and the hands-on exam in order. All of the actual learning modules, they can complete at any time.
Awesome. We do have the action here open. I want to ensure the content is organized. Do we have a date to completion that we want to add this, or is this just an open action that we're going to review every week?
I think it would be helpful to have a deadline just because there's so many different departments and content authors currently within GitLab. So ensuring that we have that date before we hit that timeline that you had mentioned for actually migrating the server over. Looking for everybody else's feedback too, but I know from my perspective, it would help to have that.
No, that would be super helpful. And I think, just the in between, like how we communicate this with all of the work that went into updating GitLab Learn, with Sid and Stella super involved in that. We just need to make sure that we work in that communication with them. Like, hey, we're migrating, we're moving content over. There's some broken links in GitLab Learn, like things are happening.
And my initial thought, Josh, to make this a lot easier is we have that master spreadsheet where we had already compiled all of the content that's in GitLab Learn, and we identified who was the DRI for each content. I think if we continue to use that master sheet and then just add additional columns to mark whether it's outdated or it's moving over, and then that has the audience listed on it on that sheet, and then list out the new naming convention. So what the title will be when it moves to the new platform would be super helpful, because then it would make it easy not only for all of the different departments to migrate the content over, but it also would be easy for us to sort and say, okay, all of this is being depreciated, and we can actually count, 200 and whatever line items are not going to be moved over. And that would be an easy reporting thing to bounce up to Sid if he asked for it.
Yeah. Maybe I'll take an action to have an offline conversation with you, just because the goal of that working group was to get rid of that spreadsheet and replace the spreadsheet with everything in GitLab Learn. So yeah, we can.
I think the other piece of that is starting to, we talk about who the DRI is for some of that content, but also migrating the content owner for some of those things, right? So the purpose of it, depending on what the purpose of that content is, should that be something that's owned by the education services team versus whoever it is that developed that content, right? And specifically, we're talking about the product enablement content. Some of the other content in there, obviously, we still need to formalize the methodology and naming convention around it, but those are things that we won't own yet. And I'll say yet because it'll depend.
That's a great point.
Okay, so should we add this as an action for next week also? Just come up with a date to complete that. Do you need to pick this up offline before we commit to a date today?
I'm good with that because that will give all of the time to discuss offline.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, still 1.2. So this point B, that is for Brian to check with Ellen about current EdCast allocation. I haven't spoke to him about this, so I'll pick it up. And the other two is just to review the requirements, which I know that the team was reviewing it, and Brian had a lot of questions, so there was ongoing discussions there. And then there's a video.
Are you sharing your screen, Barbara?
No, I'm not, but I can. Sorry, Sanand, I think you have the agenda, right? Sorry, there you go.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yeah, so we're here.
So you need to give me access to this. This is a separate thing. I could not access the file. I just am still not there. Okay.
Yeah, of course. Let me do it now.
But go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Then you should have access now, but let me know if you can.
Thanks.
Okay, no worries. Right, moving to DRI updates. Michael, let's Kendra. Sean, is there anything that you want to add? Is your overall sentiment still green? Any risks, blockers, or decisions needed from this group?
I'll let Sean and Kendra speak from, I don't have any risks right now outside of my own time.
I don't have any risks on my end either.
No risks here.
Okay, it's always good. Moving to field enablement, David. I can see
Agree,
you
no risks. Apologies for the delay, but finally did provide feedback in the doc. The TLDR there is like no new requirements. We feel like the list is comprehensive. The only, I did tag Ed Sepulus because they have one requirement that's not captured about a Salesforce integration and porting over certs and credentials to be accessible and visible at the contact record within Salesforce. But I've asked Ed to provide more context there. The only other changes made was there were a few that we adjusted the priorities to either change from should to must or could to should. No risks or blockers, no decisions needed. I'm good. So over to you, Josh.
Yeah, no risk from us as either. We're totally green and no decisions needed. Jamie, anything?
No, nothing else from me.
Okay, thank you. From the enterprise apps, my point was just to review the proposed timeline, which we did. So I'll pass to Christopher. Is there anything?
Yeah, and I just didn't know if, I know we've given you some input, Sundar, to try and have, some, budgetary line items. I think that, I know that Ellen and I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the name of the other woman in FP&A who took our budgetary numbers. And I think they added, $150,000, 100 more for subscription. So got us to 200,000 and got us to 150,000 for implementation, but I'm not sure that that's enough. And so I wanted to try and see where we were with that to ensure that we're feeding them data.
Is this a question for me, Chris?
Yes, it is. So sorry. I know that we had been getting you some usage numbers, and then I think there was some pricing pieces. So we may have the pieces and we may need to go do the math ourselves. I'm just trying to understand. I know we're sort of in process, partnering to try and again, get sort of budgetary quote items so that we didn't have to go to the individual, partners with that data,
Right.
vendors right now. Yeah.
So I propose, I think at this point, I've given some suggestions on how vendors look at what pricing models exist. I have not taken this and done an actual calculation of what the ranges might be, etc. based on this. I can go back and look at some of that and come back to you guys with just sort of ballpark. Are you in the right ballpark with the numbers you submitted? Okay.
100%. And that's what we need. Because I think if anything, the deal, Sundar, is like, if we need to raise it up and set expectations, we want to do that sooner rather than later.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. That was it for our current agenda. Is there any extra questions for Sundar? I think these are the points that we mentioned. Yes, correct.
Yeah, and I'd had some that Sundar had answered earlier on the timeline for selection, and I think David did as well.
I added a couple others. I don't know if this is for the team or for Sundar. So in number 5, said thank you, Barbara, for creating that agenda. When should we aspire to build out the timeline? Sorry, not agenda, timeline. To build out the timeline even further. Is that something we'll be in a better position to look at in end of February or into March?
Well, David, like we're actually going to need the partners to come in and help us, right? So we could go and we could, put things on paper right now, but I don't know how good that would do to set people's expectations if, the partners are going to tell us, number one, and then also number two is, I think as we get down the path and we're working on the certification program as well too, I think that we're going to have to focus our efforts on that certification program to meet that project. So to get that done and folding that in, that may then create delays on some of the, people like yourself who aren't in that primary position for that launch.
Yeah, that's fair.
So in other words, we need to your point, we need to know more before we just go and start, throwing dates and numbers around.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, it's a very good point that Christopher says, right? Each vendor is going to have, and again, the complexity of some platforms versus others, the integration with your systems, all those things will sort of come into play. Just a little too early to get into a detailed implementation plan right now.
Yep, fair enough. One other tactical question for the demos that we're scheduling next week. I imagine all of us may have some additional team members that would be interested. Well, how do we want to approach that? Can we invite those folks to the demos? Do we want to record and make them available for async?
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to really streamline again, David, when you think about this whole process of the focus being, PS and the certification program, we're really inviting those people. We're asking other people to record their questions offline and not take up time because it's going to be a very focused exercise. And then we will be sending out items for people to then have async contributions.
Will like Josh and I still be able to participate in these demos, or is it limited just to the PS?
I mean, participate is like, we're happy to have you attend, but we're also very sensitive to, we have an hour and a half. That's going to be a lot to cover for this team. So yeah, super focused. And we would just say like, if all of a sudden, you see, Kendra and Jamie and Sean expire of questions and you want to interject something, I think that's completely appropriate. But we're just trying to, again, operate from that, mindset that got us in here is that laser focus is we have to be able to get our, for sale business and certification program completed.
Totally agree. And transparently, like my interest is just thinking about that go, no go decision March 2nd. Will it meet our needs or not? Just to be well-versed in of what those capabilities are.
And actually, and so great point, David, because I think our goal is as you're getting questions or you're seeing things that you get those, and then we would be able to manage a breakout meeting where we're not, again, where we're, taking the vendor and saying, hey, let's get more time around this subject, but we're not impacting that sort of main delivery. Does that make sense?
Totally, because that's one of the areas that went sideways before. Nobody's fault, but like everybody was interested and want to have all these separate conversations, and it got wonky.
Yep. I'm gonna try to decrease.
Have we already have we already provided some guidance to the vendors on what we want them to present? Or the first meetings are really just sort of responding to the RFP and sort of doing a high-level demo?
My understanding is more the latter, but
okay.
Yeah.
What would you recommend, Sundar? Like,
yeah, great question.
I think we do have the proof of concept where we can get more specific. But I think we have to give them some guidance as to that initial focus, where we are, etc. And because they can start, saying, oh, they can all walk through how somebody signs up for a course, how they register. I mean, the experience part is going to be important as we look at that navigation and some high-level feature functionality. But is there a specific couple of areas that we want all of them to make sure that addresses our specific audience needs for the initial rollout, right? So we just don't want them to go off into too many areas and then sort of come back to this just without addressing the details here.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that we could easily create a script, that's really focused on, especially some of these technical certification use cases that are so front and center, and then also some of the e-commerce things that we're really focused on, and really have them sort of, we could create an agenda where they do a little bit of, hey, here's the overview, but then their goal is to really dive through some of those core scenarios.
And I think we should also have them touch upon, if I'm an employee, I want to have a different experience versus if I'm a customer part. That part I think we have to get, because we are going to have the system across all audiences, right? So there may be 2-3 areas that we definitely want to make sure that they showcase their demos.
Yeah, I was gonna kind of chime in on that because I think I think on that timeline, part of was like kind of like the go no go, right? With PS and the other departments there. So I feel like that's pretty key as well.
Yeah, and one thing that I would love to see that we didn't get to see from EdCast is successful use cases for other clients. Like in particular, like I know ScaleJar with LinkedIn. So successful use cases where they've actually implemented these things with other clients that they'd be willing to share. So with those examples would be very helpful for me to see.
Yeah, I think it's a great point just around roles, right? Even from a certification standpoint, we're going to have a different approach for partners versus customers on certification, right? So what does that experience look like for that, you know, outside just internal versus external, but the multiple external avenues? What does a prospect's experience look like versus a customer experience?
A lot of these folks will end up, trying to jump into, oh, we have the badges, we have this, the points, I mean, gamification. So they'll go into all the buzz, the hot areas, but the core capability, we want to make sure we don't have them distract us by not going through that part.
Yeah, completely. Because I think that was one of the areas that we fell short on with the EdCast evaluation, is what we thought was table stakes that they would just have, they didn't.
Yeah.
So is there a way that we could then get some input, Michael, from you and the team on, what I would like to do is get to, just sort of a crisp one pager of here are the scenarios that we want to be able to provide to the vendors, because we could then brief them and tee them up. And in my mind, there's sort of, hey, here's some key scenarios we really want you to walk through, end to end. And then here's, I think some overviews like, okay, what's external versus internal view? Here's some, how do these reports look? That we could just have them sort of check off and dig in. But could we solicit that input so that we could deliver that to the vendors and allow them time to prep for next week?
Think we can, and I'm seeing nods from Sean and Kendra. So
Yeah.
those are going to be the primary folks to put that together. But
Yeah.
Sean, Kendra, do you think we could do that by end of week? And Christopher, does that give them enough time to prep or?
I know that we have one on Monday, so I think we need to peel off who that is and give them some direction sooner rather than later.
I can take the scenarios that Christine and I put together for EdCast and then just alter them a little bit based on our learnings from EdCast on what we didn't have them show us. So I think it'll be important to have use cases that do end-to-end that will cover multiple points. So
yes,
for reporting,
100%.
capabilities.
And some of that stuff, and I remember some of that stuff, Kendra. I think we can use that, and we can at least tee up the vendors early in the week while we, if we need to do another iteration. Yeah.
Will it work if I just add an issue to this overall epic and then tag it there?
Oh, of course. Very much so.
Thanks everybody for the time. I gotta hop.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks for joining us.
Okay,
Sundar.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.